So when it comes to a review, I always feel like you have a limited amount of time to properly showcase what a camera can do on a phone. So this is where a focus video for the camera itself comes in handy. Now today we are looking at the Oppo Reno 2. Now this has 4 cameras on the back, and I properly want to showcase in depth how this camera actually performs. Now most of the shots are taken with automatic settings. Unless it is different, I will showcase it. Anyway, let's dive into this video and talk about the camera capabilities of the Oppo Reno 2. So let's dive into this first picture, and straight away in this first picture what I really appreciate for the main sensor and of course the 2x zoom is that they both have quite a nice contrast between everything in that shot. Also the dynamic range is actually quite good for both of them. You can even see the webcams on both of the pictures. However, if you go to the wide angle shot, you do notice that there is less contrast and the colors are less saturated as well, and it blends all more into one. It's a bit of a shame, but still overall it's quite a decent picture for the wide angle as well. Now when we look at this church, I choose to go with the main lens and of course the wide angle lens. What I can actually tell is that I like the wide angle colors better in this case. It's a little bit darker and it fits more with the scene itself. The main one is a bit too bright for me. However, both shots are actually pretty good. Though with that being said, the wide angle lens is a bit softer and it loses details because of it. Now this picture is actually quite close between the two sensors. There's a slight difference between the colors of the building itself, but apart from that it is actually quite close, and again I really like the picture itself and it came out pretty well. However, both of them are a bit darker, showing that the dynamic range isn't the best out there. However, it was a bit more of a cloudy day, so that is also something that played part in this. So with this Victoria station, what I can tell straight away is that the main sensor is actually doing quite a decent job with this picture. I really like it. However, what I do notice with the wide lens is that it doesn't capture as much detail again, and it's softer and it loses brick details on the buildings themselves because of it. Now looking at this shot of this statue, which isn't an impressive shot because well, it's cloudy and it's overcast, so you don't really get a lot of details because of it. What I can tell is that the contrast on the main lens is actually quite good, and I like how the statue pops out of it. However, when you look at the wide angle lens, there is so much more saturation, and also it loses some of that contrast that you have on that statue. But what you can mostly tell between these pictures and testing out the different sensors is that the wide angle lens loses more detail than the main sensor. It's a bit too soft for me, and overall, while it looks good, sometimes the saturation is a bit too much as well, especially with greens, where the main sensor keeps it quite natural, and I do appreciate a more natural approach for pictures. And again, between the main lens and of course the telephoto lens, what I can tell is that they are quite similar and there isn't much difference between the two. So in terms of that, it's actually quite well done. So as you know, with the Oppo Reno 2, you can actually zoom in times 20. However, most of that is digital. So here you can see the difference between all the different options. So you have the main lens, the 2x zoom, the wide, the hybrid x5 zoom, and then of course the 20x zoom. However, with the 20x zoom, as you can see, it's not the best picture out there, but again, this is mostly digital, so you cannot expect that from a phone. However, the wide angle lens has one trick up his sleeve, and that I really appreciate: the macro mode. In this macro mode you can get so much closer, and because of that capture so much more detail. I could have gotten closer to the bee, however I didn't want to disturb it, so I tried to stay a little bit away from it. Anyway, I think it's really nice to see a macro shot on a phone. Now while I appreciate the main lens itself for the more natural approach, sometimes you can tell that you are dealing with not a high-end phone. The dynamic range isn't the best out there, and sometimes you can notice it, especially when the objects are darker, especially if you have something like this statue right in front of you. You can tell that the dynamic range is a little bit hurting. And behind this gate you can also tell it has overexposure, again because of the lesser dynamic range. Nothing bad about it, but it's just something that you have to keep an eye on. Now this shot is actually one shot that I really like, especially the 2x zoom. You get a lot of details in the shot, a nice contrast, and again it just looks very pleasing. I like it better than actually on the main lens, and this is mainly because you get so close to the details that is on top of this building. I really appreciate that with this 2x optical zoom, it really looks good. With that being said though, sometimes you do notice the difference between the main lens and the 2x optical zoom, where the 2x optical zoom can be darker than it should be. It loses a bit of exposure, and because of that, it loses the details that you kind of want in there. I still think this is a good shot, but when you compare it to the main lens, you can tell that, well, the exposure isn't as good as the main lens. Not surprising, but something that I do want to show you. And then we go to low light situations, and what is actually really good is that you can use every single lens and still have night mode. So you can use the main lens, the 2x optical zoom, the wide lens, the x5 and the x20 and still use the night mode. However, I would advise you to not use the x20 and then use night mode. It takes too long to take the shot for that and you will move too much because of it. And then I have to say that in low light it is actually quite capable. In some cases you will notice like lens distortion and so on, but overall it actually performs pretty well. Especially for this shot, I really like it. There's quite a bit of detail to it and it doesn't have too much lens problems, and overall it just looks like a pretty good shot from a phone around this price. I'm quite impressed. However, then in some cases you of course get the opposite and you get shots that just don't look as nice. But again, this is a €499 phone. It's not something that you pay €1,000 for. And if you are wondering, yes, you can capture the moon with this. However, it is 20x zoom. It is harder to keep your hand still, and having then a night mode doesn't necessarily help. And not to mention that you are dealing with a lot of digital zoom, so you do lose a lot of details. And just as a side note, I also want to show you where in some cases it doesn't properly actually focus on the object. Again, this is minimal. It's just 1 out of like the 50 shots that I tried to make. However, it can occur, so do keep that in mind when you take a picture. Just quickly look at it and if the focus is proper. And then we have one final subject, and that is video recording. And honestly, on the Oppo Reno 2, video recording is actually quite good. While it isn't the best dynamic range out there, I still think it's actually pretty good. Not to mention that the stability on the video is crazy good for a phone around this price. Actually, I find it quite capable for a high-end phone as well. So the Oppo Reno 2, at the end I feel like this is quite a capable device when it comes to the camera itself. There are some changes made when it comes to not having the periscope compared to the Oppo Reno x10. Now there is a downside to it. It means that you can only zoom in 20 times, and having that 20x zoom does come digitally most of it. So it doesn't always look as nice as I want it to. But other than that, the x5 with the hybrid zoom looks fine enough. At the end, this device is €499, and that's quite impressive when it comes to the camera itself. I'm not the biggest fan of this trend of 48 megapixel sensors, But the normal picture is 12 megapixels, so I would advise to use that. It's not naturally a 48 megapixel sensor. Anyway, that was my opinion about the camera of the Oppo Reno 2. I hope you enjoyed this video, and of course, if you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like, and of course leave a comment below, and if you really like it, maybe subscribe. Anyway, have a good one and talk to you guys in the next.